Every priest knows he shouldn't give a homily on Palm Sunday, so I won't. But I'm just going to share, hopefully, 2 brief thoughts. First of all, I want to say I love the fact that the kids were a little behind there because it made the mob even more of a mob. There's a mob and a sub-mob, and there's probably more sub-mobs. And we can't even get being a mob together well. But that's the nature of mobs. There's 2 things about this that struck me. First time in 40 years I've thought of this. Pilate is the only person mentioned in our creed other than Mary by name. Pilate. And what a thing to be remembered for. He had Jesus handed over to be crucified. So every single Sunday, theoretically over 1 billion Catholics in the creed remember Pilate. How would you like to be Pilate and remember 2,000 years later that you had Jesus the Christ crucified? And I say you had it done because, and he represents for us something I think, I'm very grateful to Pilate for this, because he represents a kind of sin that in some way is the worst. I mean, crimes of passion, I'm not in favor of them, but most people kill in passion. Or they kill because they're drunk or on drugs or something, or perhaps because they're psychotic or other very terrible mental illnesses. But usually, other than the crime of war, it just happens. But there's this other kind of sin called sins of omission. It's not what we do wrong. We all note those sins. But what we could have done or should have done and didn't do. Pilate was a powerful man. He was like the king of the territory. He had the whole Roman army behind him. Please. They had already taken over Israel. And anything he said or did was going to be done. He had that kind of power. What happened to him? This man wimped out miserably. He had the power to let Jesus go free, and we see that he's even perplexed by it. Well, who should I let go? Jesus? Is Jesus you call the Christ, or Barabbas? And they said, Barabbas. And he couldn't stand up to that. And he said, well, why? What has he done? And they give him the trumped-up charge, a quote that he said that they didn't even understand. And he could have stopped it right there, nipped it in the bud, but he caved in. And I would propose to you and myself that kind of sin, the sin of omission, is really very significant and really very sad, but in a way kind of subtle. How many times a day could we and should we stand up for somebody, but we don't? Because probably we're afraid somebody will think less of us. If I stick my neck out and back up somebody or stand up for them, I might be criticized. The Holocaust was that to a huge climax. It was a mountainous amount of that people saw what was happening, but they were so afraid for their own lives, they said nothing and let it happen. And I get it. I get it. To speak up in the Hitler days could have meant your own life or your whole family's life. But there were people who hid Jews in their basements, in their attics, and risked their lives every day because they saw this atrocious thing happening in Germany, and they were willing to stand up with others. So I say thank you, Pilate. Thank you, Pilate, because you have given to us, you've lifted up for us the recognition that we are called upon. Part of what we're called upon is to be a voice for others, just as we would want people to be a voice for us. And Hitler showed how miserably, a very strong and powerful man, how miserably he failed by not using the voice that he had. The other part is this. At every single Mass that is said in every language on this whole planet, the priest always says these words, and I'm going to have you just join right in with me, you'll get it. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
Lift up your hearts.
Lift them up to the Lord.
Okay, now I want you to really say it because this is important. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
Lift up your hearts.
Lift them up to the Lord.
What does that mean? Lift up your hearts, we lift them up to the Lord. I really love this little phrase. I always am focused on this. If this is a dialogue, I say, don't respond this time, I say, the Lord be with you. And then 1,000 people say, and with your spirit. Why, thank you. Then I say, lift up your hearts. And you say, we lift them up to the Lord. For me, this is what it conjures up. You know, we can look with our eyes and our brain at things and analyze them. We could say, oh, there are a lot of people here today. I did an analysis right before the Mass. People said, oh my God, the traffic's going to be horrible today. So I said, you know, we should just extend the Mass. So I asked at the beginning of the Mass, you weren't all here yet. I said, just before the Mass, I said, how about next year we change the schedule just for this Sunday, have Mass at 7, 9, 11, and 1. How many are in favor of that? Raise your hand if you think that would be a good idea. 7, 9, 11, and 1 instead of the usual schedule. All right, I have to go through the whole thing because I'm not getting cooperation. How many are opposed to it? How many don't care? All right. Whoa, there it is, Pilate. Thank you. Thank you. You had the power to do something and you just let it go. Well, lift up your hearts. To lift up our hearts and see reality through our hearts is a whole different activity than just looking through the mind. To open our heart, to see through the heart, to listen through the heart. And what I would say today is to read the Passion with our hearts. Look and listen and feel through our hearts. This is a powerful drama, and I really appreciate how much you put into it today, all of you. When we say those words, crucify, let him be crucified. Listen to that awful phrase that the adults said when they said, well, you're going to put to death an innocent man. They said, let his blood be upon us and on our children. Now, those are some freaky parents. It's bad enough to say, let his blood be on us, but to say, and put it on our children too. Oh my God. But that's what hate does to people. That's what mobs do. They succumb to the lowest place. I propose to you that this week, and I realize I'm touching on a cultural thing here, so if you don't like what I'm about to say, just throw it out. Doesn't matter, okay? But I grew up, and it was a big thing, like no music this week. The Latinos were especially strong on this. You can't enjoy this week. It has to be miserable. I'll have you note, what do we call Friday this week? Bad Friday? Good Friday. What? What's so good about it? Well, it's only the day that we got salvation. Good Friday. And I wonder how much good comes very often through bad things and awful things. How much good has come through Pilate to show us a way that we don't want to live. So this week, lift up your hearts. We lift them up to the Lord. I would propose that you read this Passion at least one other time, then read the Passion of John, which we always read on Friday. It's different. And soak in the words. Take the part of Jesus and really emphasize Jesus' words. Take the part of Pilate, the crowd. You had that today. And feel what they said. Get into it. Feel what they said. This story is our story, and it's relived every single day. I don't know about you, but I hate to say, I think just maybe I might have been a part of the crowd. Might have been standing there, not knowing much about this story, but all the crowd's all revved up and they're shouting, crucify him. I might have been among those people. The vast majority were. And as some of the prayers of the stations across like to connect that, how do we crucify the Lord today in one another, even in ourselves? This week, I think it is less about feeling bad than it is about feeling grateful. Grateful for the Christ. Grateful for his sacrifice. Grateful for his love. Grateful for his courage and trust. And grateful for what he invites us to share in. I would hope that the primary feeling that we would have this week would be gratitude. Not sorrow, but gratitude. It is a sorrowful story, but through it, can we appreciate what has been given to us? 2,000 years later, we're still celebrating this and reaping of its powerful benefits and fruit. This week, enter into Holy Week. If you haven't been ever to a Holy Thursday service, come. If you've never been to the Chrism Mass, go. If you've never been to Good Friday, come. And if you want to go to the mother of all celebrations, come Saturday evening. I know, 3 hours, 8 to 11, but it is worth it. Come and experience what this week is trying to say to us as fellow Christians, so that we can come before the passion, death, and resurrection of the Lord and find its saving power.